Alright, so let's continue talking about punishment. And in this lecture I want to look at the Kantian approach to punishment. Remember last lecture we looked at the utilitarian approach. And the utilitarian, we say, why punish criminals? And the utilitarian answer is primarily to deter crime, to prevent crime. There's also that we as a society like to see criminals punished. That's a minor factor. But the big one is punishment is justified primarily to prevent crime. Well, how does punishment deter or prevent crime? Well, the big way it does this is by making an example of the criminal. We punish him, others see him punished, they might want to do the same thing. They decide, well, this isn't worth it, right? Well, what would Kantianism think about this way of thinking about punishment? We punish criminals to accomplish these good social ends of preventing crime. Is that acceptable or not if you're a Kantian? No, of course not, right? If your reason for punishment is, well, we inflict these punishments on these criminals, but by doing it we'll achieve this good social end of less crime, Kantianism would say you are using criminals as mere means to a good end, less crime, but you cannot use people as a mere means even to good ends. Alright, well, so would Kantianism say that we should never punish criminals, right? Had this scene a few lectures ago of some criminals saying to the judge, no, I know you guys want to send me to jail, I know I've killed a bunch of people, but, I don't really want to go. You have to respect my reason, see y'all later. Kantianism would not say that. That's a ridiculous position. Kantianism, in fact, is very much for punishing criminals. It's fairly eager to do this. But punishment cannot be justified in the way the utilitarian does. And it cannot have the aims that utilitarianism says that it does. Well, why punish criminals? The Kantian answer is actually really simple. You can put it in one sentence. We punish criminals because they deserve it. Or to put it another way, because fairness demands it. Criminals have committed a crime. They have taken unfair advantage of other people or done harm that other people don't deserve. And because of that, they deserve punishment. In kind of metaphorical language, punishment evens up the score, right? Criminals earn this because he's treated other people in a way they don't deserve, and we give him what he deserves. This approach, this way of thinking about punishment, is often called retributivism. It's called retributivism because the point of punishment on this theory is retribution. Criminal has done something wrong. Well, the response to that is to punish him, to give him what he deserves. Well, now you might be asking yourself, how could this possibly fit with the formula of humanity? Even if the criminal might deserve punishment, he probably doesn't want it, right? If he says, no, I'd rather you not, how can punishment fit with that? How can punishment be said to respect him as a rational being if he doesn't want to be punished and we punish him? Well, the Kantian answer is we have to be clear on what it is to treat someone as an end in themselves, to respect their ability to act for reasons and choose what are and aren't good reasons, right? That's what it is to treat someone as an end in themselves, to respect this ability to act for reasons and choose what are and aren't good reasons for them. And a Kantian would insist that part of what it is to treat someone as someone who acts for reasons and can decide what are and aren't good reasons for them is to hold them to certain standards. You know, you act for reasons and you decide what are and aren't good reasons for you. Well, because of that, you should be held to certain standards in a way that a being that doesn't do that isn't, right? Think about this, right? Imagine that, you and I agree to meet somewhere at a certain time, and you just get engrossed in like some video game you're reading or some video you're watching, and you show up 20 minutes late. You've made a decision that what you're doing matters more than inconveniencing me, right? And, it would make perfect sense to be irritated with you if you did that. If I've been waiting 20 minutes somewhere and you show up and I say, "Well, what happened?" And you're like, "Well, I was on level 23 and level 23 is really fun and I hadn't been there before and I just had to finish it, right?" You know, how angry or annoyed it would make sense for me to be would depend on what I was doing that day, how important the meeting was. But, no matter what, it would make sense to be a little annoyed, right? You could make a judgment how important I and my time is, and you have decided that it is less important than level 23, right? Or I'll give you guys another example. Years ago, I used to have these idiot downstairs neighbors, right? Just jerks, right? And the dude who lived there would show up. I guess he worked at some brewery downtown, and he would just like show up at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, back to his apartment, and start talking about the brewery. Really loud, just horrible hipsters, by the way. Just horrible, horrible, horrible hipsters. They'd play Mario Kart at 3 in the morning with the volume turned up. I don't know why you have to turn the volume up to enjoy Mario Kart, right? I had to work the next day, right? Do this on a Friday, it's mildly annoying. You do this on a Tuesday. And I would get so angry at these people. And just a few times I would just pound on their door and yell at them. I'm like, "Do you know what time it is? Why are you doing this?" They'd generally stop. But, why was I angry at these people? Because they should know better, right? They should know that they have neighbors who have to work. They either know that and don't care, or they think so little of their neighbors that it never occurs to them, right? When they choose what are and aren't good reasons for them, turn down the Mario Kart, talk a little softly, maybe hold the conversation for the next day, they decide that the inconvenience, the annoyance they cause their neighbors, they decide that they don't care about that. That isn't a good reason for them not to do this. Now, contrast that with, imagine that some dog just starts barking at 3 a.m., right? It wouldn't make sense to be angry at the dog in the same way. I mean, I have a dog. She does this. And I have to remind myself she's a dog. She's dumb, right? The dog can't take account of any of that. Dog hears a noise, dog starts barking, right? It doesn't make sense to blame her for waking me up in the same way it would my idiot, inconsiderate neighbors that I used to have, right? Moxie, my dog, she doesn't do this a lot, but she does it sometimes. She's not deciding, "Hey, I really want to bark, but I know that would wake everybody up. I don't care. My joy at barking is so much greater than their inconvenience at waking up, so I will bark," right? That's not what's going on in Moxie's little doggy brain, right? She hears a sound, she wants to bark, she barks. Does not make sense to be angry at her in the same way it does my neighbors, because she is not a being that can act for reasons. She's not making these decisions. Well, at a larger level, the same holds true of criminals, right? You know, they can decide what are and aren't good reasons for them, and when we when they choose to victimize people, you know, they shouldn't do that, and by holding them to the standard that they shouldn't do that, we are treating them as rational beings. You know, holding someone to certain standards and holding them responsible, making there be consequences for failing to meet those standards, are both part of what it is to treat someone as a rational being. And that justifies a lot of human behavior, just our anger we feel at people when they don't treat us with proper respect, the gratitude we might feel at people when they do treat us with proper respect, right? And it's a good part, in fact, the main part of what punishment is for a Kantian. Kantian will say, look, if someone commits a crime and we don't punish that person, we are saying one of two things. Either the perpetrator is not responsible. And if we say the perpetrator is not responsible, we are in effect saying that he's not a rational being. Or we're saying the action is acceptable, that it's okay to do to the victim what the criminal has done. And a Kantian would say, in normal circumstances, there might be cases where one or both of these messages is true. Extenuating circumstances, we'll talk about some of those in a second. But in normal circumstances, either one of these statements fails to respect somebody as a rational being. Statement 1 fails to respect the criminal as a rational being. Statement 2 fails to respect the victim. It's saying, well, it's okay to treat the person this way. And so Kantianism would say, by punishing a criminal, we respect both the criminal and his victim as ends in themselves. Hegel, a follower of Kant, well, he had some differences with Kant, but a successor of Kant's who picked up on a lot of Kant's themes, even has this seemingly weird language about honoring a criminal by punishing him. And it seems weird, most criminals would say, I'm going to turn that honor down. But Hegel's point is, by punishing a criminal, we are treating him as a rational being. We are respecting and recognizing his rationality, even if he might not like that. All right. So let's look at the questions we looked at for utilitarianism. Why do we not punish the insane and not punish children if we're Kantians? For utilitarians, it's just because, well, it doesn't work, right? They can't really be deterred or deterred that effectively, so no point. For a Kantian, it's different. They are not rational beings or not fully rational. Statement 1 here is actually true, so there's a reason not to punish the criminal. Children, the insane aren't rational. Children are sort of gray area, But the idea is they're not rational or not fully rational, so it does not make sense to hold them responsible, or does not make sense to hold them fully responsible, at least. Well, why do we punish some crimes more harshly than others? The utilitarian will say, well, because, it's all about the value of more prevention. Kantian will say, no, it's just fairness. We punish some crimes more harshly than others because some crimes are worse than others. And we want to give the criminal what he deserves. The punishment should fit the crime. Kantians will say the harm done to the criminal should roughly match the harm done to the victims. Now, retributivism might seem harsh, but if you think about it, it actually puts really strict limits on punishments. No matter what, You cannot punish a criminal more harshly than he deserves. You cannot do something to him that is worse than what he has done to his victim or victims. And I think if you think about it, Kantianism, Retributivism, even more than utilitarianism, would say that a lot of our punishments are way too harsh. You know, if you steal my car and it's recovered, you could go to prison for a good time, right? But if it's recovered, how much harm have you really done me? You've done some. You should probably go to prison for a bit. But, years? Probably not, right? Theft, especially if you can, pay me back for what you've stolen. Does that merit years in prison? Almost certainly not for a Kantian. For a good retributivist, even more than a utilitarian, I think they would say that many of our punishments are far too harsh. Unless you kill somebody, it is very hard, unless you kill or permanently disable someone or inflict permanent psychological trauma on them, it's very hard to justify sending someone to prison for very long at all if you're a retributivist. Why? Because the harm done to the criminal almost certainly exceeds that done to the victim or victims. So, despite its appearance, I think a retributivist would probably put stricter limits on punishment than would a utilitarian. A utilitarian would say, well, it doesn't matter if the punishment exceeds what the criminal deserves, it just matters if punishing him is worth it given the prevention. A Kantian, on the other hand, would say, you can't do that. You can't treat a criminal unfairly no matter what.